11, 7 through 19, that text where Jesus has sent out the 12. They depart. John is in prison. That question that he sends back, that, as I said, Austin did just such a wonderful job of dealing with. The beautiful statement that there's never been one born of woman greater than John. And the example that's being held up for us in his preparing the way for Jesus, him recognizing the relationship that he has with Jesus. And then there towards the end, Jesus says, listen real close. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear. What am I going to say about you guys? What am I going to say about this generation? He said, you're a whole lot like children. You didn't get what you expected, and you didn't know how to respond to it. You show up on the city square or the temple stairs and you look at each other and say, hey, we played a song of joy and we got no dance out of it. We played a song of sorrow and we got no tears. We're not getting what we expect from you. And he said, that's the same way you reacted to John. You didn't get what you expected. John didn't do the things that you thought he should do, and so you decided that he must have a demon. And then he turns it to himself, and this is where we are this morning. He said, I came as the opposite of John in many ways. He said, I came into the city. I didn't stay in the wilderness. I interacted with you. I sat down and had lunch with some of you. And you looked at me and said, hey, he came eating and drinking. He's a gluttonous man. And he is the friend of tax gatherers and sinners. Key phrase there for us this morning. A key phrase to investigate to see if it's true and how it's true. Understand Jesus is speaking, but this is one of the cases where he is quoting his naysayers. So he is quoting what someone else is saying about him. So sometimes when that happens in the text, we have to see if it is an accurate statement and that he is giving his stamp of approval to the statement, or if it is an inaccurate statement and he is disputing it. So questions that we ask. Is he a friend to sinners? And if so, what does that mean? Well, let's start with number one, of course. Is he the friend of sinners? Look back to chapter 9, verses 10 and 11. He has just called Matthew in verse 9. Also called Levi, and that reference in Luke chapter 5 uses the name Levi for him. He said, follow me, and Matthew arose and followed him, and it happened that he was reclining at the table in the house. And Luke tells us that Levi actually threw this reception. Levi has a meal to get to know Jesus better. And as he is, a lot of tax gatherers and sinners are coming into the meal. Probably people that Matthew knew. Probably friends of his. Probably his, we're going to become one of our words, his social circle. And they're dining with Jesus and with the disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why is your teacher eating with the tax gatherers and the sinners? We don't understand. not what we expect. He's a rabbi. He's a teacher. He's different than everybody else. So why a meal populated by those who he should consider beneath him? Is he, they're asking in a sense, the friend of tax collectors and sinners? Luke chapter 15 is a very familiar set of teachings for most of us. It is the 99 and the 1, where the shepherd goes and finds the sheep. It is the widow looking for the coin. It is the story of the prodigal son, who ultimately turns out to be the elder brother. And the text tells us the context. All the tax gatherers and the sinners were coming near him to listen to him. And both the Pharisees and the scribes began to grumble, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So again, the accusation. That's what Jesus is referencing in Matthew chapter 11. I didn't keep the same social contacts that you thought I should keep, and so it bothered you. Is he the friend of sinners? The simple answer is yes. He doesn't run them off from Matthew's table. He does not bar the door so they cannot get in. And in fact, as he goes on to teach in Luke chapter 15, the point of this series of parables is you should be concerned about tax collectors and sinners. You're the elder brother. You're the one turning your back on those who have wandered away. I came to reach them. He called a tax gatherer. He called Matthew. He calls a man who has sold out to the Roman Empire and is collecting taxes on their behalf. And he draws him into his circle of disciples, of followers, of believers. He ate with them. He sat down at Levi's table, and he ate with Matthew, and he ate with the rest of them that came to the meal. So he does not deny their accusation. He is, on some level, make sure you hear that because we're going to come back to it. He is, on some level, the friend of sinners, the friend of tax collectors. The text that we were looking at earlier, Matthew chapter 9, after he hears their thoughts, it is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn. Go and learn what this means. I desire compassion, not sacrifice. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. He actually defends his position among them as a position that is designed, desirous of reaching them, of calling, there's a key there, calling them to Him. He said, they need me. The righteous, the well, are not the ones who need the physician. They don't need to be fixed. They're not the ones who need me in their lives. So try and understand, you naysayers, my Father needs people with tender hearts who will reach out to the sinner, who will reach out to the tax gatherer. So I came because that's what He asked for. I came to do just that. And so we're going to kind of insert an extra question in there, 1A maybe. Why? Well, because there's no one else to love. We're all sinners, Romans chapter 3. If He had not come to be the friend of tax collectors and sinners, He wouldn't have had any friends. If He hadn't come to call the tax collectors and sinners. He wouldn't have had anybody to call. We all fall into the group of sinner. They need Him. And they know they need Him. That's one of the keys. Luke chapter 18. When the two men go to the temple to pray, and one is boastful and one is arrogant, and I'm glad I'm not like that man over there, and the other man beats his breast and won't raise his eyes to heaven. He said, which one went home justified? The one who knew he needed me. The one who knew he needed the Father. But here's what I want to make sure we understand this morning. This is where we're going. Question number 2. What exactly does that mean? What exactly does it mean when they say He's the friend of sinners? And what does it mean when He accepts the title? Is He accepting it the same way they're using it? I have heard some explain, and they use it as their reasoning for a modern day mission, that it means we are to be best buds with everyone in the world. That Jesus is saying, and this is what they're intimating. This is what His naysayers are saying. You're not just rubbing elbows with them. You have an intimate relationship with sinners. You are interacting on their level. And so some have taken that to mean that is the only way we reach the world is becoming absolute best friends with the world. We do the things they do. We act like they act. We go where they go. We hang out with them on their terms. Listen, I used to do prison ministry. I had some success, baptized some people, had a lot of Bible studies. You know what I did not do? I did not move into a prison and set up house and live on their terms and interact with them in their world. I worked on calling them out of that. They use this to say we go where they go. That we develop close personal relationships. Listen very carefully. Please listen, make sure I get this. I have worked and reworked and worded and reworded over and over and over to make sure that I get across what I'm trying to get across. I believe that if we watch Jesus in the Gospels, we watch Him in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as He interacts with those around Him. I believe that we need to define friend of sinners very carefully. Yes, He is the friend with everyone on some level. He's not ugly to them. He is not shunning them. He is not avoiding them. He is not bullying them. But there are levels to His friendships. The tax collectors and the sinners, the woman caught in adultery, the woman they're not on the same level as Peter, James, and John. Does that make sense? They're not interacting the same way. He was not going to the local hangout with anyone and everyone. When He is spending intimate, close friendship time with people, who's He spend it with? He spends it with the 3. He spends it with the 12. He spends it with Mary and Martha and Lazarus. You see, if this is Jesus' series of social circles, at the very center there are Peter, James, and John. You know, even among the 12, there are times that He pulls them aside from everybody else. And they're the ones. They're the ones that are allowed at the Transfiguration. They're the ones that are allowed in the Garden of Gethsemane, not on the edge of it, but a little deeper in. Then there are the other 9 They're with him nearly all the time. There's Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And I don't know, I think sometimes the way it looks in Scripture, you could slide them up there with the other 9. Or maybe even getting really close to being up there with Peter, James, and John when it describes Jesus and Lazarus' relationship as friends. But as you go out from that, have you noticed that there are other disciples that are not there day in and day out? You know, they're following him sometimes, and sometimes they're leaving. In Acts, it's 120. Then on that outer edge, we see him interact with them. We see him kind with them. We see him doing things for them. There's the woman at the well. He sits down and has a conversation with her, but he doesn't go back home with her. He has a conversation with her in a place where he can dictate the conversation. He can maintain his purity. He can be seen immediately when the others walk up. The woman caught in adultery, brought to him, deserves to be stoned. He interacts with her. He shows her mercy. He's going to die for her. But when she leaves, what does he do? He challenges her not to do it anymore. And he doesn't go hang out with her. Zacchaeus is going to have lunch with him. But that's the last time we see them interacting. As you move away from the center of Jesus' social circle, the level of friendship changes, becomes less intimate. He spends less time with them. He is not socializing with them in the way he is socializing with Peter, James, and John, with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And he's not socializing with them in the way he's being accused of doing by his enemies, or in the way that some try to portray it today. Those 3 inner circles are friends in the way we use it. They are friends. They eat together, they travel together, they sleep in the same homes together, they entertain each other. It's those big 3, and it's those apostles, and it's Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And then that 4th circle, they're disciples, they're followers, they're friends to an extent, but they're going home at night. They're not there day in and day out. And then that 5th circle, he interacted with them, he aided them, he healed them, he cast out their demons, he taught them, he confronted them. Whoops. Repeating my slide. But here, listen very, very carefully, because this plays a role in what we're going to look at. For them to move into his inner circle of friends, they had to move. He did not move. It was not the other way around. He did not change who he was to be friends with them. They had to change who they were to be friends with him. He did not compromise. He didn't compromise where he went. He didn't compromise how he talked. He didn't compromise how he acted to be their friends. He did not change at any point to increase the level of friendship. When he called the 12, including a tax gatherer, they were required to move into his circle. Matthew had to leave the tax office and follow him. Peter, James, and John had to leave the boats and follow him. They had to move into his circle. They had to follow. They had to be discipled. They ultimately had to become apostles. To reach the lost, we have to know the lost. But we cannot be friends with the lost, friends with those in the world, in the same way we are friends with each other, with like-minded people. Being friends with the world makes us an enemy of God, James 4 and verse 4. And so we have to understand that there are levels of friendship that Jesus had with His world, and there are levels of friendship that we have to have in our world. If Jesus' process of winning the world did not involve leaving His center point, if it did not involve Him compromising who He was, if it did not involve Him compromising His relationship with His Father, if it didn't involve Him compromising His language or His actions, mine cannot. I cannot win the world by trying to fit into the world. I must move those with whom I interact toward Jesus rather than the other way around. Now here's the why, and we're going to look at another why tonight. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 33. Do not be deceived. Evil companionship corrupts good morals. Again, I need you to tune in. You've heard me say, don't take that out of context. The context there is those who deny the resurrection. And he says, if you hang out with people who deny the resurrection and you begin to buy into that doctrine, it corrupts your morals. Because if there is no resurrection, there is nothing controlling your actions, because you're not going to stand before God. But keeping it within that context, the principle holds true outside of the church too. If we are not supposed to let those in the body corrupt our morals, would we be allowed to let those in the world corrupt our morals? No, not at all. That doesn't make any sense at all. So the point is, we said at the beginning, our theme all year long is God's at the center. It's all about Him. It's to His glory. And I have a couple more that we're going to finish up between now and the end of the year. This is one of them. For my social circle, for the way I interact in this world with people, to bring Him glory, to be about Him, my inner circles, those who influence me and are a part of my day in, day out life, must be made up of like-minded people. So they help me stay on track and bring glory to Him. For my social circle to bring Him glory, for it to be about Him, my outer circles should be made up of those I am trying to bring into that inner circle, not by adjusting the parameters of that circle, but by bringing them to Christ, so that I am not friends with the world, but I am friends with God. We have to be very, and young people, please listen to me. Young people, please listen to me. You're social creatures as a whole, and you interact in a social world. Young people, listen to me. We have to be very careful who our closest friends are, because they have so much effect on us. Jesus didn't change who He was. When the rich young ruler couldn't make the adjustment to be in Jesus' inner circle, Jesus didn't chase him down and say, let me change the parameters of my circle. He was brokenhearted, and he loved him, but he let him go. There are friends that if they're not changing to fit the standard that God requires us to have, there are times that we have to say, that's enough. All right, you're not going to be the influence in my life. And young people, I'm going to add this, and we're going to touch on it again tonight. Think of it the exact same way when you enter the dating pool and the looking to marry pool. If the person is going to be the magnet that pulls you away from Christ rather than the other way around, think long and hard. Think long and hard. Because in the end, back to the context, 1 Corinthians 15 verse 33, evil companionship corrupts good morals. In the end, we're going to stand before God because there is a resurrection. And if I've been corrupted by what I've allowed in my life, it becomes a very scary encounter. Does your social circle, do the people you spend the most time with in this world and call friends bring glory to God or not? Is He at the center of it or not? And if you need to change that social circle this morning, I encourage you to do so either by obeying the gospel or by, sadly enough, shaking the dust off your feet when the time comes and moving away from them as we stand and sing.